It's now my honor to introduce a board member of the U.S. Capitol Historical Society. You probably know him from the PBS NewsHour or from CNN's Capitol Gang. He's been a syndicated columnist for more than 25 years. And please welcome Mark Shields as he offers advice to new members from your predecessors and from his own long experience as an astute observer of the political process. Ladies and gentlemen, the man from Weymouth, Massachusetts, Mark Shields.
Hey, thank you, Ron. That was a beautiful introduction, far better than the one I received recently in Baltimore, where the master of ceremonies said simply, "Now for the latest dope from Washington, Mark Shields." So I appreciate it. I want to remind you, if you're waiting for the bar, as Henry VIII said to each of his 6 wives, "Don't worry, I won't keep you long." I first met Ron in 1976. He was a Ford delegate to the Kansas City Convention when Ronald Reagan was challenging for the nomination. And if there's anybody who should stand as an example to the personal approach to politics, it is, in fact, Ronald Reagan. And even though Ron was a strong and effective supporter of President Ford that year, we won the nomination. I think even he and people on both sides of the aisle would agree. Ronald Reagan took his job seriously. He did not take himself seriously. He came to Washington. He had leisurely work hours. He began his day at 9:30. He was barely in the Oval Office after 4:30. And we in the press, who were carpet critics, scolds, started to question whether he was up to the job. Because in Washington, we don't make anything. We don't make cars. We don't make movies, at least not that often. We don't grow crops. So sometimes we can't measure output, so we measure input. And that is, what did you do yesterday? Well, I got here at 6 in the morning. And what did you do? I didn't leave till 9 last night. So if we can't tell you what we did, we tell you how long we didn't do it. And so we get on Reagan, we get on Reagan's case a little bit, and Reagan comes to an off-the-record dinner with reporters, and he stands up and he says, "Tell me hard work never killed anybody. I figured why take the chance?" And at that point forward, no one could lay a glove on him. He had an ability to laugh at himself, to take a situation and to diffuse it. Quite openly, the First Lady Nancy Reagan and the Chief of Staff Ronald Reagan were basically at each other's throats. There was open warfare in the White House. And Reagan came to another dinner with reporters off the record, and he said, "I'm telling you, Nancy and Don Reagan are patching things up. The two of them had lunch today, just the two of them and their food tasters." It was that great gift that I think should stand as an example of all in politics. Well, my favorite, I covered Ronald Reagan, and he had a marvelous facility for sometimes saying things that weren't factually based. He never attempted to deceive. Deception was not in the man's soul. But along the way, he picked things up. They got on his 5x8 cards. Sometimes they didn't have a strong empirical foundation. One of his favorite factoids for the 1980 campaign was there are 214 taxes on a loaf of bread. There are not 214 taxes on a loaf of bread. Asked about this by a young UPI reporter, said, "Governor, can you tell us your source for that?" The governor, with his 10,000-watt grin, said, "Reader's Digest, April 1952. Right next to humor and uniform. We're in Steubenville, Ohio in September 1980 is the day Ronald Reagan delivered the most memorable of all his factoids. Trees cause more pollution than automobiles. We all headed for the phones because we knew this was as good as it was going to get. It's a great concept. The next time you're in the Jersey Turnpike and your eyes are watering, blame a pine tree in Maine. So our next stop was likely to happen was in Southern California. We're out at Claremont College where Governor Reagan was to speak, and some wise guy graduate student had hung a sign on a tree. It said, "Cut me down before I kill again." And nobody laughed harder at it than Ronald Reagan. And that to me was a great tribute to him. On the Democratic side, I guess I put Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas, as a woman with just remarkable humor and in both cases, they used it effectively politically. Ann Richards used to tell the story that she was not the first woman governor of Texas. Texans in the room might remember that Amanda Ferguson was the first governor of Texas. She succeeded her husband, Pa Ferguson, who was the only governor in the history of Texas to be indicted, arrested, and convicted. And Ma jumped over. She was a woman with very limited education, a strong principle. She took on the Ku Klux Klan when that pernicious group was at its all-time high in power in Texas. But the big issue of Ma Ferguson's governorship was a raging public debate over the teaching of foreign languages in the Texas public schools. And Ma Ferguson came square out, totally, unequivocally, categorically against the teaching of foreign languages in the Texas public schools. And this was her statement: no more teaching our children dirty, rotten French and Spanish. If English was good enough for Jesus Christ, it's good enough for Texas. Now, I say this because politics is above all else a personal business. And the people who have gotten here obviously already know that and know the fundamental rules. There are a few rules of Washington. Washington is a pretty damn nice place. I've lived here voluntarily for 51 years. There's a lot of good people here. A lot of people get here by running against Washington in both parties. But we do find it charming. We find the people here both interesting and dedicated to something, in most cases, a lot larger than just themselves. It is a good town, and I'd say this, that there are certain rules about politics, and let me just read this to you if I could. I believe that politics, in addition to being great fun, is basically the peaceable resolution of conflict among legitimate competing interests. In a continental nation as big and brawling and diverse as ours, I don't know how else we resolve our differences, except through politics. Compromise is the best alternative to brute force of money or raw numbers. Compromises that are both wise and just are crafted through the dedication, the skill, and yes, the intelligence of our elected politicians. I like people who run for public office. I like people who run for public office. For most of us, life is a series of quiet successes or setbacks. If you get the big promotion, the hometown paper announces your success. It doesn't add that Shields was passed over because of his unanswered questions about his expense account, because of his erratic behavior at the company Christmas party. But in politics and elections, by 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night, everybody who was sat next to a study hall with double data, with babysat font, knows whether you won or more likely you lost. And I admire particularly candidates who can lose with grace and humor. In my long 50-plus years, I've never seen anybody do it better than a fellow named Dick Tuck, who was running for state senate seat in Los Angeles. He lost by an eye-inch. The election results were announced, and a reporter from KMBC Radio stuck a microphone in front of his face. He said, "How do you feel, Mr. Tuck?" And Dick Tuck said, "The people have spoken, the bastards." The first time I ever slept in the same quarters with African Americans, or took orders from African Americans as a matter of course, was at Paris Island, South Carolina, at Marine Corps boot camp. And the only reason I did that was because the President of the United States, named Harry Truman, said it is fundamentally unacceptable, and in the last analysis, un-American, to ask people to fight and possibly die for their country and then to segregate them by race. I admire, too, the courage of Ronald Reagan. Back to California in 1978, having mounted that unsuccessful challenge to President Ford, about to make his last run for the presidency, having won briefly against 1968 against President Nixon, and then against President Ford in 76. He was going to be 69 years old in 1980, and that was going to be the last term. But in 1978 in California, there was one of those pesky ballot measures that Californians love. They're going to right turn on red or whatever else. I mean, Californians vote on everything. And this one was called the Briggs Amendment. And it would have banned any gay or lesbian person from teaching in the public schools of California. Not for any action, not for any behavior, but by simply being gay or lesbian. And it was leading in the polls. And Ronald Reagan came out against it. And Ronald Reagan said, that isn't how we judge teachers in the state of California. We judge teachers on whether our children learn in their classroom. So I just want to say that this is an important mission upon which you have launched and have reached at this point in your career. In the entire history of our marvelous country, 226 years, there have only been 10,880 people elected to the United States House of Representatives. Everybody who's ever served in the United States House of Representatives has been elected. You don't get appointed, you get elected. You go out and you run for it. 845 United States senators have been elected since the 17th Amendment was ratified in 1913. And I say that because this is a very special charge you have. I can assure you that in every fight you'll be in, there'll always be somebody on your side who wishes to vote he was on the other side. That is the truism of politics. And I return to Ronald Reagan at the beginning, who said, someone who's with you 80% of the time is our 80% ally and friend. He's not our 20% enemy and opponent. I think that's important to remember, because any institution, whether it's a political party or a religion or a social group, can be measured by whether it's looking for converts or it's looking for heretics. If it's spending all of its effort and energy and time searching out heretics who don't agree with us on 13 out of 13 issues, otherwise they're banished to the outer darkness, rather than saying, we agree on more than we disagree, welcome. And I say this as one piece of personal advice after 51 years in Washington. Reach out across the aisle. Just anybody. Have coffee, go to a movie, have a dinner. Just get to know them as people. Because it's a marvelous place with marvelous people in it. And I believe in that politics that wrote the GI Bill, that passed the Marshall Plan to rebuild the war-torn and war-devastated Europe, that saved the Great Lakes, that through Social Security took quantum terror out of old age. The kind of politics that teaches us all we owe to those who came before us and those who will come after. And that is that each of us has drunk from wells we did not dig. Each of us has been warmed by fires we did not build. At their best, at their worst, politicians like the rest of us can be petty, venal, and self-centered, just like the press. But I believe politics at its best can help to make ours a world where the powerful are truly more just and where the poor are more secure. Thank you. Have a great evening.